In this tutorial, we'll take a look at the GPTune transform inside DaVinci Resolve. Now, I've already got a project open here, and I've got a number of GoPro clips already loaded into the timeline. So firstly, let's have a quick look at our project settings and go to our color management. Now, in this particular instance, our color science is set to DaVinci YRGB, which essentially means that this is a non-color managed workflow. So let's start off by loading the DCTL. So we go into our Effects tab, select the DCTL, and load the GPTune transform. Now, before we really start, let's have a quick look at the settings that are available here. So firstly, we've got the exposure correction, which allows us to adjust the exposure from -6 to +6 stops. We have the log base, which allows us to set a custom log B value, and the offset as well associated with that log base. Now, these particular settings are only adjustable when our curve preset is set to custom log B, but we'll come back to that in a bit. The next option we have here is the GoPro model. So we have a number of different GoPro models, and each different GoPro has its own unique color matrix associated with it. Next, we have the curve preset, which has Protune flat, GP log, as well as custom log B. And the default value is custom log B set at log base value 113, which essentially means that this is a Protune flat curve. Now next we have the GoPro color space, where we have native, wide, Rec 709, and Rec 2020. The wide option here is specifically GoPro Labs firmware, where you can enable wide equals 1, which means that it uses a native color space with auto white balancing. Similarly, you can also set a Rec 2020 color gamut in your GoPro Labs firmware. Next, below that, we've got the lighting preset, which has the Daylight and the Tungsten presets. Below that, we've got the color science, which allows us to choose between ACES and DaVinci YRGB. We next have the timeline color space, which allows us to select a number of different output color space options. And we've got the timeline gamma as well for output to a number of different timeline gamma options. So this particular clip, we shot it with the Hero 11 using Protune flat, and it was 2 stops underexposed. So let's adjust the exposure here first to correct that. Next, let's select the Hero 11. And we can see that our waveform has slightly changed as well. And in this particular instance, it's a nighttime shot, but we've got a lot of harsh yellow lighting here. So let's change the lighting preset to tungsten. And we can instantly see that the orange glow is gone. Now let's copy this preset over to the next clip. So this particular clip was shot using the Hero 11 using log B 200 and an offset of -128. So firstly, let's change our lighting preset back to daylight. And let's correct our log base value to 200 and change our offset to -128. So that footage has been corrected as well. Now let's try something different. Let's circle here and change our color management to an ACES workflow. So firstly, we select our ACES input transform as no input transform, and let's change our output to a gamma 2.2 output. In this case, I'll go ahead and select Rec 709 gamma 2.2 ODT, which is a custom ODT that I've got on GitHub. All right, so we can immediately see that this clip looks a little bit strange. So we need to make a few more adjustments in the transform to get it working properly with ACES. So let's change our color science to ACES, our timeline color space to ACES AP0, and our timeline gamma to match with what we had in the project settings, which is ACES CCT. So this clip has been normalized perfectly. Now let's move on to the next clip. Okay, so this was shot using the Hero 12 with the GP log native. So let's right click on this clip and select our input transforms. So we go into the ACES input transform, ACES transform DCTL, and from here we can select a number of different options. In this case, because this clip was shot using GP log and native, we'll select the GoPro HERO 12 GP log native IDT. So that's been corrected. Now, moving on to the next clip. This particular clip is the HERO 11 using a log-based value of 400 with a 2-stop underexposure. Now, essentially, this is GP log without calling it GP log. So for this particular clip, let's also set our ACES input transform, and we go into ACES transform DCTL and select GP log native for the HERO 11. So there we go. That's been corrected as well. Now let's move on to a different clip here. So we've got the HERO 7 here shot using Protune flat and native, but this was shot indoors using orange indoor lighting. So firstly, let's go ahead and select our HERO 7 input transform for Protune. Now, once we selected that, we can see that it's looking quite orange. So that's not really what we want to see. So let's go ahead and change that to the tungsten preset. And we can immediately see that that's looking a lot less yellow. Now moving on to our next clip. This was on the HERO 11 using effectively GP log. And let's do something slightly different here. Let's move over to a color management workflow. So if we go over to DaVinci YRGB Color Managed, and let's change our color processing mode to HDR. Now, once we've done that, we also need to deselect automatic color management, and we can see that our color processing mode is showing as Rec 2020 intermediate. However, there's a few more things we need to do here. So firstly, let's go over and select custom. And what we really want to do is disable this input DRT. And the reason behind that is if we leave this input DRT on, DaVinci will internally do some tone and gamut mapping to bring this timeline up to a 1000 nit working luminance. We really don't want to do that because we don't want DaVinci to be altering our input. So we've deselected that, and let's save that. And now let's select the DCTL one more time and use the GP Tune transform. So this shot was the HERO 11 using effectively GP log. So let's adjust that accordingly. So go into HERO 11 and GP log. And our project settings are using Rec 2020 and intermediate as the gamma. So let's make sure we align with that as well. So we select our gamma as DaVinci intermediate and our timeline color space as Rec 2020. Having done that though, we can see that the footage doesn't look quite right. And the reason behind that is we need to make sure that at the clip level, we're setting our input color space to same as timeline. At this stage, it's selecting the project setting, which is Rec 709 scene, which is not what we want. So let's change this over to same as timeline and let the transform do the color space conversions. Now we can immediately see that it's really, really orange because again, this was shot indoors using orange lighting. So let's change our lighting preset to tungsten. And that's been corrected really well as well. So let's copy our transform and paste that into the next clip, and this time changing that to the HERO 12. Now we can see again that there's a slight shift in the colors because each GoPro model uses a slightly different color matrix. And again, for this clip, we need to make sure that our input's color space is set to same as timeline. Now, moving on to the next clip, we can see that this particular shot was on the HERO 11 using effective GP log with a wide equals 1 setting on the GoPro Labs firmware. And again, this is effectively a native color gamut with automatic white balancing. And we can see that because it was shot indoors, there is a fair degree of white balancing occurring here. So let's copy our GPTune transform from the previous clip onto this clip. So firstly, let's change our project settings to same as timeline. And in this case, we simply go ahead and change our GoPro color space to wide. Now, what this does is it disables the daylight and the tungsten preset because it's an automatic color balancing happening internally within the camera. So there's nothing else we need to adjust here. And in this case, our GoPro model doesn't really matter because our color space is set to wide. So let's copy this over to the next clip and make the necessary adjustments on the input color space by setting that to same as timeline. Now we can see that they're perfectly aligned as well. So that was a quick tutorial on using the GPTune transform for DaVinci Resolve.